Cord to this computer. Thanks for the reminder. I just like this Zoom account is my day job's Zoom account, so I don't want to record to the cloud there and have any issues. So I'll post this to YouTube after we're done though. But as I said, it's I find that adverse weather like this is a great time to get not just tech work necessarily, but just if you got homework, busy work, that kind of stuff. Just like say you're normally not necessarily doing anything anyway. So it's a good time to get that kind of stuff done. So I think what we're going to do is I'm going to look over Moodle. And I meant to, I need to do that too. I didn't send an email out this morning. We're moving on to chapter 3. So even though like we're not having for the seated class, even though we're not having class, that doesn't change our schedule. We're going to stick with our normal class schedule. So we'll be moving on to chapter 3. So I thought the plan for today is I would go over chapter 3 in Moodle and just sort of talk about a few things and show some things there. And then I've got slides for there may be some folks on are not uh, who are not in the seated class, but this will give you a chance to sort of see what the seated class is like because I'm doing this similar to what the seated class is. So we'll go over some things in Moodle and just make sure we're clear. And I'll take any questions people might have about the assignment or what they need to do. And then I have a few slides, just PowerPoint slides. I'll review and just go over those. Okay. So with that being said, let me share my desktop. Pull up Moodle. So hopefully you all can see that. If you can't, somebody let me know. Okay, so I'm just going to go over chapter 3 real quick and just make sure uh, we're clear. And if anybody, I think, lots of times, unfortunately, whether it's in class or like Zoom like this, I'm often preaching to the choir as far as like most people, if you're here, you often maybe didn't necessarily have any issues with the assignment, or at least there wasn't any confusion about what you needed to submit. But anyway, that being said, certainly folks, if they get a chance to look at the report, it may clear some things up. Anyway, again, chapter 3 screencast is there, so check that out. I didn't go back and rewatch it 100%, but I think generally everything I'm covering here, I'll sort of cover there. Generally, what I'll do, again, we're only in the third week, so you all may not have a feel for how things go. But generally, what I'll do in the screencast is I'll often cover one or more of the assignments for that week. I often won't do the entire assignment, but I'll sort of get you started just so you can sort of get a sense of what you need to do. But for chapter 3, I have here complete steps 8 through 10 from the exercises in the book. So I'm going to pull up the book here. You all don't, just so you know, for any of the Mirac books, you can get an electronic version of the book, which is really good. I actually a couple of years ago, I moved to that and started exclusively using the electronic versions of the book just because, just because they're electronic and you can go, I can take them anywhere. Um, so, for instance, I'm going to chapter 3 exercises here. The exercises in the book are always at the end of each chapter. And so here I'm asking you to complete steps 8, 10, and 13 from the exercises in the book. So that would be starting here, 8, 10, and 13. So I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but I'll just take one as an example. Write a select statement that returns 3 columns from the vendors table. So, and then 3 columns it wants you to return are vendor name, vendor contact last name, vendor contact first name. Then run this statement to make sure it works correctly. And then they also ask you to add an order by statement. So again, it's just going to be up to you to come up with that select statement. Now let me see before I speak out of turn. Make sure. Can't remember if you all have the solutions for book scripts. I kind of think you do. Let me go in here. Go back here. So for instance, this is chapter 3, number 8. And so 3, 8. Let me see if this statement looks exactly the same. Okay, no, I don't think so. I wanted to make sure that some of the Mirac books actually give you the book solutions. Well, no, here we go. Yeah, example solutions. So for instance, 3, 8. Yeah, there we go. So just so you know, you've got the solutions to the exercises. Now, just so I'm clear here, um, and this is going to be true for the other assignments I give you. So, for instance, here in number 1, I'm asking you to complete steps 8, 10, and 13 from the exercises in the book. You've got those solutions. So, my recommendation generally here is to, take some time. Again, you can run this. You've got to manage your time however you see fit. One way to do it is to challenge yourself and say, okay, I'm going to see if I can come up with the select statement that I need, and then just go back and look at the solution here to check and see if you got it right. In this case, again, they're asking you to select vendor name, vendor contact, last name, these other things from vendors, and then they ask you to add this order by statement too. So again, you've got the solution here. Go ahead and submit that, even though you've got the solution and it's sort of a gimme. Go ahead and submit that as part of the assignment. I'm asking you to do it, so I still want you to submit that as part of the assignment. And then notice on number 2 here, I asked you to modify the following queries in the book based on the requirements below. And so this is the one. Now, this obviously is going to be more of a challenge because you don't have a solution here. And I'm asking you to modify an existing query. So in this case, I say modify the query from step 9. So then again, here you're going to go to step 9. You're going to look what it asks for there. And then so I'm asking you to, so that the results are displayed as first initial, and you can use the left function for that, giving you a clue, a comma and a space, and then the full last name. Okay. So I'm asking you to modify a couple of the queries that are in the book. And so you can follow the instructions there. Again, I'm not going to go through each one of these. And then finally, for the My Guitar Shop exercises, a couple of folks had issues with that, or maybe some confusion about where that is. If you download the student download that's in at the top of Moodle, if you download that, I actually just went back and added the My Guitar Shop, some of the My Guitar Shop files there, so you may need to go back and re-download that. But the My Guitar Shop exercises themselves are in a Google Doc. Let me go new window. And so those are all here. And yeah, you'll just follow the instructions and, generally you're going to be writing some type of query for these. And then you're also using the My Guitar Shop database. That's the big difference in the queries for the book. You're using the AP database. The My Guitar Shop exercises you'll be using the My Guitar Shop exercises. One last thing before I'll pause for questions here in a second. Let me make sure there's nobody waiting to get in the waiting room. Okay. One last thing. Let me just walk you through sort of how you would modify or how you would run these queries, because there's some sort of confusion there, or there may be. I just sort of want to show you how I would do it. So I'm in my terminal window here. I'm going to log into MySQL. Or I'm logging into Linux here, and now I'm going to log into MySQL. Don't be confused by it. This just doing sudo MySQL, that's a little different than the -p, the -u username that you all use. I'm going to show databases here. I'm just going to use somebody else's database because I'm not going to be modifying anything. And so I'm logged into the database here. I can run queries. I can say select star from invoices, and I'm going to get something there. Select star from invoices, limit 5. Okay, so I can view the data. So for instance, I'm going back to the assignment. I'm asking you to complete steps 8, 10, and 13. Again, those are the ones where you're not modifying anything. Let's choose one of these where I'm asking you to modify. I'm asking you to modify step 9, and then I'm giving you the actual query or the actual SQL that it is. This is EX309. So for instance, I can go pull up student download, example solutions, CH3, so CH309. So I pull that up. Now I'm working locally here, just so there's no confusion about that. I'm on my local computer, so I've just got a text editor. In this case, I'm using VS Code, and it's just much easier, So for instance, and just for starters, real quick, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to copy this query. I'm just going to paste this into MySQL. I'm going to run it. I see the results get returned. Just so you can up arrow here too. If you run a query at the console, if you paste in a query, you can use the up arrow to pull that same query back up, and then you can also modify it. For instance, if I remove vendor contact, I don't know if this will break the query or not. It still runs. And then, so for instance, for the edits that I'm asking you to do, or the modifications here, I'm saying, modify the query from step 9 so that the results are displayed as first initial comma. So I'm asking you to modify that query. One way to do it, rather than trying to modify the query here and like use the arrows and backspace over things, that's a little bit clunky. It may be easier, and probably my recommendation would be to modify the query inside a text editor first. You can, again, very easy to just modify inside a text editor. And then once you make a modification here, then you can copy and paste that from your text editor and then go back and paste it inside inside the console and run it so you can see the result. Okay. And I'm going to pause there, and let me get my Zoom a little better. All right, let me pause there and see if anybody has any questions. Feel free to unmute and ask. Okay. All right.
Do you have any resources for I feel like I'm trying to learn command line prompts and sort of understand them a little better when I'm
Sure.
doing all this. So it feels like I'm learning two things I don't know. Do you have any resources that you would recommend for becoming more proficient?
I don't, other than what I think I put a command line tutorial here inside Moodle. I've got a little command line tutorial. Other than that, I don't. I'm going to leave it up to you, because I only say that because there's a ton of stuff out there. Now that actually makes it harder because there's so many resources to choose from. But all I would say is Google it, and if there, Google it in general, or if there's a specific command, I mean, think about the thing that you're trying to do, and then Google that specific thing, rather than, if you just Google general command line, I mean, it's going to be fairly broad, and there are, literally hundreds, if not thousands, of commands that you can run it at Linux terminal or inside MySQL. So I say that to say it doesn't narrow it down very, very well. So, soon, and I understand you have to get to a point where you know enough to even know what to Google. So I understand that is an issue, but soon as the quicker you can get to a point where, okay, I need to, I only want to display records that are greater than 500, let's say, like you're looking for an SQL command that's going to allow you to do that. And that's the thing you want to Google, rather than Googling more general Googling more general things. Just a note about the sort of Linux commands. And again, I've had students complain about this in the past, say, I took this class to learn MySQL, not Linux, and not, all of these other things. My sort of response to that is, number one, just knowing SQL, like just knowing how to write a select statement. If you can't even install MySQL, or you can't even you don't even know how to log into MySQL, doesn't do a whole lot of good. I mean, it's conceivable that you could have a job where they've already got everything set up for you and it's ready to go, and your job is just going to be to run, SQL queries. However, I would argue more times than not, you're going to need to know more than that. You're going to need to know some of the sort of nuts and bolts about MySQL and how to set it up, how to log into it, how to do those things. That's number one. Number two is that, again, if you're going on, and I think most people who are taking DBA 120, you'll be required, if you're getting any kind of certificate or anything, you'll be required to take DBA 210, which I'll be teaching this summer. And DBA 210 is, I think it's MySQL server administration or MySQL administration. But when you take that, we'll be doing more Linux stuff there. In fact, you'll be setting up your own Linux server there. You'll be installing your own version of MySQL. So a lot of this is a precursor to some of the work you'll be doing this summer. Any other questions before we move on? I'll mention the Discord server. I think many folks are inside there. If you don't know about Discord, either email me about it, or if you're chatting with any other students, you can chat with them about it. It's sort of an unofficial message board. We don't. I try to stay. I was going to say I don't. I'll go in from time to time and just look and see what's going on, but I try to stay out of there, because I understand it's a student sport. I want it to feel like a student space, and so there are a handful of instructors that are in this Discord, but I generally stay out of there and just let it be a student space. So
I will say, Zach saved the day last week. That thing was blowing up with people struggling in this
okay,
Yeah,
July.
God bless Zach. God bless Andy. Yeah,
Yeah.
everyone really came in clutch
Yeah.
there.
Zach
okay,
helped me really figure it out though, and I was thankful for that because I think just getting your setup right was crucial.
hmm good. And that's that's a good thing. I mean, I like seeing students stepping up like that. The argument might be, I mean, I've had students, the argument might be, well, as an instructor, you should have all these things laid out for us beforehand. And I would just say it's a lot, and it's often going to be chaotic regardless of how much information. I mean, there's a pretty good amount of information that's already there. And so often throwing more information doesn't necessarily help. It's just, the nature of a lot of this technology is that it's drinking from the fire hose is often the term that's used, but it's a lot of information to try to digest in a relatively short amount of time. So yeah. Okay. All righty. All righty. Well, if you think of anything else, I'm gonna move on to the slides and just doing sort of a general presentation now. So if you think of anything, if you want to write it, if you want to sort of
That's what we
make a
use.
note to ask that at the end of the Zoom session, feel free to do that.
Can I just ask a question about the Discord? Because I don't know how to get
Mhm.
on there. Is there a server or something?
So I think an invite needs to be sent. Is that right? Is anybody who's on Discord here? How did you get on to
There's
Discord?
there's a tiny URL link. I can Audrey, what's your student email? I can email it to you.
It's Audrey Henning.
Audrey, if you want to put it in Zoom chat, that might be a
Yeah,
good way. That way he doesn't fat finger it.
Okay.
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, the other thing is the sort of plug for Discord and why it's great too is, again, if you go on to do even not so great things in tech, you're probably going to be working in, Slack is the tool I use for my day job. If you all haven't heard of Slack, it's a chat tool that's very similar to Discord, and I do a lot of my work in there. So often teams, and these days, even if you're on site, even if you work in a synchronous environment where you're working in an office space, uh, Discord and Slack are often used there just because that's just the way folks work now. You can be having a Slack conversation with somebody who's one office down, and it's quicker to just send a quick message to somebody than it is to have to get up and walk down the hall, and they might be in a meeting or they might have other things going on. So you've probably heard me use the term asynchronous at this point. This idea of asynchronous work is big, and it's what it means is like you don't have to necessarily be present or have a present conversation with someone to get stuff done. It's this idea of, okay, I can send somebody a message to ask for this thing and they'll get to it when they can. Email is a part of that too. That, I if you've dealt with me over email any, I will often ask for, if students ask for a Zoom meeting, if we haven't emailed a little bit first, I'll say, well, hey, first send me an email with the issue we're having. Let's see if we can resolve it that way first. The goal is that you need to learn how to do this. You need to learn how to type and communicate, in an asynchronous way, whether it's over chat or email, because that's the way the real world works. Okay. So let me.
Sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna see if I might just put the Zoom link in the Discord chat. I think that could also
that would
probably
be a way
work.
to do it. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Pardon me.
Okay. All righty. If you can't see this, let me know. Let me see. Okay. No, that's not what I want. Let's do.
That link might not work, Duncan. It needs to be a tiny URL link. I'm about to get it from Robert.
I'm going to modify. I think you all are seeing the current slide and the next slide. So I'm trying to modify this. So you're just seeing the full page. I think what I'm going to do is just do this. Drag this out. Okay. So hopefully you all can see that way. If I go into presentation mode, I've got two monitors, so it sort of throws things off. All righty, so I'm just going to sort of plow through these. And again, if you're not, if we've got folks here that are not in the CD class, this is part of what you get if you come to the CD class. A lot of stuff can be kind of dry, so I go back and forth about how valuable sort of lectures, traditional lectures like this are. I think back when I was a student, and I kind of liked, again, it's a measured approach. Everything in everything in moderation. And so generally these are 30 to 45 minutes long, these presentations that I do. So if you have questions about anything, just I'm going to sort of plow through these. If you have questions, feel free to unmute and ask. All righty. So these are the objectives. So chapter 3 is basically, again, the title they use is how to retrieve data from a single table. So again, really, this is really all about select statements, and then the sort of from where, order by, and limit terms are the functions that we'll be using for these select statements. And these are this is the sort of nuts and bolts basic select statements you'll be doing. The majority of sort of MySQL queries are sort of basic select statements like this, and essentially you're just trying to view and return data. And then although that sounds fairly simple, there's all kinds of different ways to view data and to return data in a format and in a view that makes sense. So that's really where all the functionality comes in. All right, basic syntax of select statements. Again, you use this sort of select keyword, the select list, and then you use your from, where, order by, and limit functions. Notice the brackets you'll see here. Those are optional statements. So in this case, you've got your select statement, which is the required, notice there's no brackets there. So select and then select list that's required. And then it's from, where, order by, and limit. Those are the optional statements. And the 5 clauses, yeah, and in fact, those are, I think I used the term functions. Those are actually clauses is what those are. So the from, select, from, where, order by, and limit. Those are clauses of a select statement. Basic, just sort of vanilla garden variety, select statement, select star from invoices. It's often good to just run this, especially if you're new to a particular database. From a testing standpoint, we did this when you first loaded the AP database. You might have had a question about, okay, did the database actually load or not? Just doing a vanilla select statement like this and making sure you get data that gets returned. Good basic way to just sanity check that, okay, I've selected the database and I'm retrieving data, that database. Retrieve 3 columns and sort rows. So just to break this down here, we open with our select statement and then the columns that we want to display. So in this case, invoice number, invoice date, invoice total. Of course, you can see those get returned here at the top. Those are our column headings at the top. Where are you selecting data from? In this case, from invoices. And then our order by statement, order by invoice total descending. Order by is the order which you see those. So if you've used like a Google Sheet or Excel spreadsheet before, and you have you can display data in either ascending or descending order. That's what the order by statement does. In this case, we're going to be ordering by the invoice total column. So this column here, and in this case, it's in descending order, which means it starts with the highest value first and then goes down to the lowest. So highest to lowest. Here, retrieving 2 columns with a calculated value. So again, our select statement, invoice ID, invoice total. And then notice we're actually doing some math here, right? Credit total plus payment total as total credits. So the credit total and the payment total, you're just doing a simple addition there. And then that as statement is actually what the heading is going to be. So in this case, total underscore credits. Notice that's what the heading here is. So the as, that's what that as statement does is, and that as value can be anything you want it to be. So it's just a logical description for the column and then the data that's underneath it. In this case, we've got a where clause. So in this case, where invoice ID is 17. So in this case, we're just looking for a specific record, assuming there's only one invoice ID that's 17. Then that's what we see here, right? Invoice ID 17, and then you see this other data that's associated with it. That's what our where clause does. Okay, retrieve 3 columns for rows given dates. So now we're mixing in some of the date functionality that MySQL has. So again, select statement from invoices, where, and then notice where we've added these dates with our where clause, where invoice between. So notice we've introduced a couple of keywords here, between and. So in this case, where invoice date between 2022-06-01 and 2022-06 or 2022-06-30. So again, the idea there is we're pulling any invoices that have an invoice date that are between these 2 dates. And in fact, again, just to sanity check this, if we look at our data, that makes sense, right? Notice the invoice date, all of these invoice dates are between this June 1st, 2022 and June 30th, 2022. Yeah. Okay, select statement that returns an empty result. Yeah, I think the point here is just to know that just because no records are returned doesn't mean you're going to get an error or anything like that. You'll just get it again. You get an empty result set. Now notice the column headers are there, right? And these invoice number, invoice date, these are the same. Those are the same thing you see in the select statement up here, but again, no actual data is being returned. expanded syntax of select calls. So here, so we're introducing the distinct. All is by default. So if you run a select statement, it's going to give you all records by default, but then we can also add this distinct keyword. I think we'll see an example of that on the next slide. And then 4 ways to code column specifications. We'll look at using a calculation or a function or some other things in these next couple slides. So again here, select star. So again, select star is going to return all rows, any rows that match the values you're looking for. And then as opposed to retrieving specific columns, right? And in fact, I think we saw that in our example here when we did select star. So if we do select star from invoices, again, the default here is we're getting all of the columns from that table, right? In invoice ID, vendor ID. I could change this, of course, to select rather than select star. I could say select invoice underscore ID, and I only get invoice IDs. Column specification that uses calculated values is similar to what we saw earlier. This is sort of typical math for our math junkies out there. These follow the same. We'll talk about order of precedence and that kind of stuff too. All those same math rules, even more advanced math, all of those things apply in MySQL. So again, we can do basic math like you see here, and even some more sophisticated stuff too. Mostly what we'll cover is fairly basic though. And then we also introduced the concat function here, CONCAT, concat, and that's short for concatenation. If you're concatenating something, you're sort of taking two things and bringing them together. So in this case, select concat, first name, last name is full name. Maybe we'll see an example of that next. It's just going to print both the first and last name as values as part of the select statement. Yeah, we're not. So hopefully we'll see an example of concatenation. Select statement that renames columns. Yeah, just note that we can use this as keyword to actually rename. So the select invoice number as invoice number. So even though the actual column name inside invoice is invoice underscore number, notice how the heading here is actually, we have it as invoice number without the underscore and then capital letters in front, right? So again, just doesn't affect the actual values that get returned, purely just allows you to modify the column heading.
So is that kind of like sorry to interrupt, but like putting a print statement in a PHP thing? It's just changing.
It is. Yeah, it's purely you could call that foobar if you wanted to. Anything inside quotes is really just a text string, and it can be any value you want it to be. Select statement that doesn't name a calculated column. Yeah, okay. So in this case, notice we don't use any kind of as statement. So again, here you get invoice number, and then what they're highlighting is the calculated value, invoice total minus payment total minus credit total. Notice we didn't do an as statement for that column. So when it gets printed out, it's just going to grab whatever the actual column names were. It just puts that inside the column heading. Again, if we wanted to clean that up some, see, yeah, they don't show us an example. If we wanted to sort of make this look pretty, we could have an as statement. A lot of this, what it comes down to is, where this is helpful is for like reporting kinds of things. You might be writing a query like this, and a non-technical person, a manager or a sales person is going to be coming back and looking at this. If a salesperson looked at this, really all of these headings might look kind of funny to them, right? If they're looking at a report, maybe you've got a report on a website, or maybe you're just cutting and pasting this into a CSV file and going to share it with them. They could probably figure out what invoice number and invoice date means, but it doesn't necessarily look quite as nice as having like invoice numbers you see here, right? Certainly this invoice total minus payment total minus credit total might throw them off. So you might want something like, let's see, invoice total minus payment total. Yeah, I'm not sure what I was trying to come up with what an actual good, what a good column heading might be, but I don't know enough about what's going on the background there to know. But anyway, again, where this comes in helpful, being able to modify these column names is not just for you on the technical side, but if non-technical people are looking at these results. All right, arithmetic operators and order of precedence. Again, we can do the same things you do in general math and even more sophisticated stuff. We can do multiplication, division, integer division, modulo, addition, subtraction, all those things we can do. Select statement that calculates balance due. Again, just an example here. So in this case, right, we're selecting these various columns, and then we've also doing this last one, invoice total minus payment total minus credit total. And in fact, okay, that's where I was sort of struggling to figure out what a good column heading might be here. Yeah, that's balance due is the actual heading that makes sense, right? And again, if you are a non-technical person looking at a report like this, balance due makes a lot more sense than this mathematical operation. Use parentheses to control sequence of operations. Again, you can do order of precedence in MySQL too. And if you understand order of precedence, anything that's inside parentheses gets calculated first, and then you move on to the other calculation. So in this case, invoice ID plus 7, that operation would be done first, and then you would multiply that times 3. And in fact, you can see the difference in those here. So they do select invoice. So here, this first column as multiply first does not have the parentheses being used, and then this add first does, and you notice you come up with different values there, right? So again, that's basic math, but again, it matters in the result you get, right?
Sorry, Professor.
Mhm.
I had a question about slide 16. Insofar as formatting an operation under us, like naming it, is there a best practice for formatting that? The only reason I ask is because I could see myself not adding a comma somewhere and accidentally putting some some cells or some columns as accidentally grouping things wrong. Can you put parentheses in? Like, could I say invoice total minus payment total minus credit total as balance due all within a parentheses? Is that going to break anything?
You could. No, it wouldn't.
Okay.
There are some escape there. There's possibly, and it depends. I don't parentheses. Well, parentheses may be. I know for sure quotes, double quotes, and single quotes can be an issue. So there may be some escape characters you need to use. I won't go into what escape characters are, but basically special characters. It's often a backslash. So if you wanted to use, for instance, if you wanted to use a single quote actually inside of the column heading at the top, I'm almost sure you would have to use an escape character for those. So there's no best practice necessarily as far as how you want it formatted. It can display whatever makes sense to either you or the people that are going to be viewing it. But there are rules. There are some rules around. Again, if you start getting into special characters and you want to include those, then you're really just going to have to experiment with those and see. Because there are potentially escape characters you would need to use.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Div and modulo operators. I'm not going to go too far into the modulo is a fun one. I always like to talk about. It's generally new to. I mean, if you're a math nerd, you've probably heard of it before. But outside of that, unless you're a math nerd or you're a software developer with some software background, you've probably never heard of it. But it basically returns the remainder. It returns the remainder of two values. So in this case, invoice ID modulo 3 as remainder, whatever invoice ID is. Let's see if they have invoice ID divided by 3. Trying to understand that decimal. Let me see here. Let's just sort of walk through this. Invoice ID divided by 3. So yeah, the result of, so in this case, invoice ID is 1. So if we divide 1 by 3, the actual value that gets returned, the actual decimal value here is 0.333. The integer quotient is 0, and then the actual remainder is 1. I'm a little confused. It's not immediately clear to me why the remainder is actually 1 here. Okay, yeah, it's 1 because, well, I was going to say we're going to round the decimal quotient up, but I'm a little confused by, I would have expected number 2 to be 2, so it's not jumping out at me why the remainder is what it is. But anyway, look at those more, and hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, shoot me an email. We'll figure it out together. Let's see what determines sequence. And again, I talked about order of precedence. So again, order of precedence. I don't have order of precedence right in front of me right now as far as addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. But the order of precedence in general in math, those things apply. And then, of course, anything that's in parentheses always gets calculated first. Here's some examples of the concat. I talked about the concatenation function earlier. Concatenation, again, is just this idea of bringing two strings together into a single field and displaying them. So the example they have here, select vendor city, vendor state. So vendor city column, vendor state. And now we're concatenating vendor city and vendor state. And then we're pulling this from the vendors table. And then notice the result here is the combination of these first two fields, right? So in this case, Madison, Wisconsin, and then Washington, D.C. The obvious sort of improvement here, or upgrade, would be to put a comma in there. Now, Duncan, this sort of gets to the question you asked earlier about, being able to sort of modify what actually gets displayed. So you might want to add some different characters in there. In this case, and they may or may not show us an example in the next slide of this. We'll see. But the sort of fix here would be to add another field where we actually add a comma along with a space. So we see Madison, Wisconsin, again with a comma. Let's see. Yeah, so we actually see that here, right? So this is the upgrade to the previous query. Now we're concatenating vendor city. And then notice inside single quotes, we add a comma and a space. And we add a comma and a space between vendor city and vendor state. So you can see that here. And then, by the way, let's go ahead and put the zip code in there too. So again, same thing. Now here notice we're adding the single quotes with an empty space. So that gives us our space between the state and the zip code. And then we're using our add statement here to make the column heading address. Okay. Hopefully it makes sense. Okay. All right, how to include apostrophes and literal values. Again, sort of getting to the previous question, although these are apostrophes down inside the actual values that are getting returned, but I think it's similar. I imagine these same rules would apply. I wouldn't be surprised if they'd also apply to the column headings. But in this case, we've got a concat statement adding our vendor name. So we're adding the vendor name and then an apostrophe and then the address. So yeah, here's our vendor name. It's actually an apostrophe S. is what we're adding, and then address. So, watch your quotes here. For quotes like this, you always have to have opening and closing quotes on either side. So, notice this one that I'm pointing to here and this one, those are the opening closing quotes. And then anything that's inside there is a literal print, except for, notice there's two quotes inside here, but you only see one quote that actually gets printed. And so in this case, that one single quote is actually the escape character for this other single quote. If we put a single quote in there, that would be, well, you know what? Let's see. Yeah, I can select this. Let's run this. So for instance, let me go to MySQL. If I run this, see if this will run without errors. Okay, so we get that. Let me limit that to 5. So notice we got our single quote. Now, if we run this again, I'm going to run this again and just put a single quote up here. And I'm actually not sure. Let's see. Yeah, I'm actually not sure what it'll do. So I'm going to remove the escape character here. So I'm right in front of these two S's. The idea here is you've got two single quotes, but only one actually gets printed. So if we just do a single quote there, yeah, it actually breaks the quick query here. The reason that is that part of your SQL queries are, depending on what's in quotes, it's just it may or may not be valid syntax. So in this case, because I removed one of the quotes, I actually get let's see if I can escape out of here. Yeah, there we go. Just so you all know what I did there, I did Control C. So if you're ever in MySQL and you sort of get stuck in a prompt like that, you can generally do Control C, and that will allow you to exit the current query you're on. But yeah, so the point there being is that these escape characters are required. If they're not there, then that often will break the query. All right, terms to know: function, parameter, argument, concatenate. So we've talked about concatenate some. Arguments are anything that's returned, anything that's, I guess you'd say, passed to anything that's passed to a function. Those are generally called arguments. And again, if you've taken C++, Java, PHP, you should certainly have heard the term argument before, but arguments are generally passed to functions. So just as an example here, again, in this case, the function is concat. That's the function. And then inside the parentheses, there are parentheses there are parentheses after the concat function. Anything that's inside those parentheses are arguments. Arguments are generally separated by a comma. So in this case, we would say the concat function is being passed two arguments. In this case, the two arguments are vendor name, and then I won't even try to say this, but the apostrophes along with the address. So when we talk about functions and arguments, those are the kind of things we're talking about. And then parameters, parameters are actually sort of used, at least I use parameter the same way I would in an argument. I would say a parameter is passed to a function, so I'm not sure. There may be some other technical difference that I'm missing, but generally parameters and arguments are generally used interchangeably. Syntax for the left function. So in this case, we're returning. If you think about it like the data being returned, anything that's on the sort of left side is getting returned. So in this case, select vendor contact first name, select vendor contact last name, concat left. So in this case, vendor contact first name, and then 1. So in this case, this is actually a good example where we have nested functions being called. So the two functions here are concat and left, and then concat has two. Concat has one argument that's being passed to it. This entire chunk here, again, what's inside parentheses is going to be the argument that's being passed. So in this case, the left function is being passed to the concat function, is the way you would say it. And then the left function actually has two arguments that are being passed to it. So in this case, again, the left function is being called vendor contact first name 1. So the data on the sort of the data to the left of vendor contact first name is being called. And then left vendor contact last name 1. So in this case, the first character, what's actually in sort of plain English, what's happening here is the first character of the vendor's first name and the first character of the vendor's last name is being concatenated and returned to the initials column. And we can actually see that here. We're printing out the first name, Francisco. We're printing out the last name, Alberto. And so FA are the initials, and we can see those here. All right, let's talk about date format. Dates are sort of near and dear. If you take either my C++ or Java class, we have a whole chapter that's dedicated to those dates, and date formatting is near and dear to every developer's heart. And so MySQL is no different. Lots of options for formatting dates. And again, if you go on to be a software engineer, software developer, then you will there will be much wailing and gnashing of teeth around dates and formatting dates. And everybody has a different way they want dates. So you're often trying to satisfy, stakeholders about a particular format that they want, whether it's, month, day, year, date, month. There's no shortage of combinations. So in this case, we have the date format function. Again, there's a function and there's arguments, right? So in this case, the date underscore format function takes 2 arguments. It takes the date and then the actual format that you want to display of that date. So here's an example in action. Select invoice date, and then we're calling the date format function. We're passing in the invoice date, and then the format we want in this case is going to be month, day, year, as month, day, year, and then so they're showing us 2 different versions of the date format function here. And notice the second argument is just slightly, well, it's more than slightly different. It is different, right? Rather than this percent %M, D, and Y, you have percent %E, B, and Y. And then notice the output difference here. And you can see the result here. So this is a pretty common, this whole syntax you see here, which, is sort of odd. It's not really very intuitive. It's very common, not just in MySQL, but across programming languages in general. Python uses it, Ruby, PHP. I've seen it used in many different languages. So this will look familiar if you've did a bunch of date formatting really in any other programming language. That most likely it will look familiar to you. Okay, round function. This allows you to round numbers to a particular decimal place. Again, super handy. You just never know when you're going to need to round, either to make things less specific, and what I'm thinking about there is for reporting purposes. Maybe you just want nice round numbers. You don't want a bunch of decimal places necessarily there. And again, that would be just on sort of general reporting. To maybe more specific, if it's a financial statement, if it's scientific, scientists often want to know things not just 2 decimal places, but they might want to see 10 decimal places there. So again, round function allows you to do that. In this case, round function accepts 1 argument, in this case the number, and then these brackets allow you to specify the number of decimal places inside that. Okay, I see what they're saying. Yeah, 1 argument. The brackets, if you recall, that just shows us any optional arguments or any optional statements or arguments that you can add. So in this case, it's an option. And in fact, you'll see that here. Notice the example here for the round statement. All we do is pass invoice total, which is going to be a single number. In this case, we're just going to, and we'll call it nearest dollar. And then the second round statement, notice we're actually passing two arguments to it, invoice total, as well as the number of decimals. The second argument here tells us the number of decimal places we want to see. And then we can see an example of that here. Again, the nearest dollar, just to take this first example, 3,813, and then 3,813.3. All right, select statement that tests a calculation. Again, let's see, I'm trying to think if there's anything I want to say here. Maybe goes to the question that was asked earlier about being able to format, column headings. In this case, we do have a special character. Yeah, you would call percent sign a special character, but notice there's no escape character for it. So really just depends on the characters whether you need an escape character. We already saw earlier that single quotes definitely needs an escape character, but in this case, a percent sign doesn't. And I'm just curious. I'm going to run this real quick. So notice this statement ran. What I was curious about is I wonder if we could put a single character in here. I'm not even going to do it because I'm sure that single character is going to break the query similar to what we saw earlier. But if I add two of those, then we should see a single quote inside the, in this case, it's going to be in the column heading. So if I do that, well, no, it didn't. We actually got both of those. So if I put a single in there, let's see if just a single one will show up. Okay. So actually we got a single quote there. I would have expected that those double quotes to have broken the query, but it didn't. So good example there though of sometimes you just have to try stuff to see. You can read the rules all day, but at least for me, the true test is actually going there and try it and just see what it does. All right, I want to speed this up some because I've got quite a few slides left and we're coming up on 1 hour. Select statement with a concat. I'm just going to sort of move through these. Looked at the round statement. We looked at that. Distinct is an important one. Notice we're using the distinct keyword here. Select distinct vendor city, vendor state from vendors. Distinct only shows you distinct values. It only, so if there's repeating values in a row, then it'll remove repeating values. So in this case, select distinct. And in fact, let's experiment with that real quick. If we do, so again, select distinct. And so if you run this, and the key here, look at the number of rows we've got. Notice we got 53 rows that got returned. If we remove the distinct keyword, I think we should get more than 53 is what we would expect, assuming we have multiple values, all right? And in fact, we do. Notice we get 122 rows. And then notice what happened here was, notice we've got multiple, for instance, Washington here. My question is, though, if you remove distinct, I think it maybe just grabs the first value. So let's run the distinct, sort of keep your eye or trying to take a mental picture of this. Notice we've got, 5 or 6 Washingtons returned, but notice they're different states or combinations thereof. Let's see which Washington value gets returned with distinct. Actually, I think what's going to happen here is we'll see 1, 2, 3, 4 Washington values get returned. The only truly distinct one, I think this is the distinct function, is being applied to both the vendor city and vendor state. So we should get, rather than seeing 2 Washington DCs, with this query, we're only going to see 1. And in fact, yes, that's what happened. Although we only got 3. So in this case, New Jersey, Iowa, and DC are the Washingtons. Okay, right. Yeah, that makes sense, right. There were actually 3 Washington DCs here. So if we remove all of the duplicates, then we ended up with 3. Okay. Okay. Yeah, where we should talk about where statements. In this case, where and then the comparison uh, operators. So comparison operators, again, if you've got any kind of software background, these should make sense. And again, not even software background, but just sort of basic math, right? Equal to, less than, equal than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. So just a couple of examples of these. I'm just going to take one here where invoice total greater than payment total plus credit. So again, this just sort of adds another layer to our math that we were doing. Some maybe not so intuitive things though. Notice this where vendor name less than M. Well, that's kind of weird because generally we think of less than or greater than as being applied to numbers, not letters. But in this case, if you think about it, it makes sense where vendor name less than M, A through L, I think it's the letter right before M. Anything that's A through L is going to get returned. Well, in fact, yeah, here it is here. They explain it. Anything A through L is going to get returned because A through L is less than M, or the other way to think of it is the sort of left side being on the left side of a given term. In this case, anything to the left of M is going to get returned. We can also apply this to dates. Notice we can do less than or equal to a given date. Again, maybe a little unexpected, but makes sense if you think about it. We can do and or statements. And again, most of these are pretty intuitive. You don't have to think too hard to sort of make sense of them, right? Where vendor state equals New Jersey and vendor city is equal to Springfield, right? So it's only going to return records that have those two things that are true. And we can do an or statement also, where vendor statement is New Jersey or vendor city is Pittsburgh. And then you can also do not, where not vendor state equals California, which means anything other than California will get returned. Okay. Just looking for anything else here that we haven't covered. You know, this is a kind of a sneaky one. You can have these in. Notice we're using the in keyword here. So where term ID in 1, 3, and 4. So for instance, so yeah. So one way to use these in statements are in what's called nested queries. So notice we've got a select statement here, and we could run this select statement on its own. I won't do it, but select vendor ID from invoices where invoice is this, and then we say where vendor ID is in those. So again, in this case, it's looking for a particular set of values. Those particular values have to be present in the results of a query for them to actually be returned. Between, I think maybe we looked at this earlier, but again, sort of makes sense if you think about it, where invoice date between, and in this case, we're passing two dates in. Again, another use of between, so I think those, yeah, I think that all makes sense. Wildcards, you'll see these a lot. Let's see an example. Yeah. So in this case, where vendor city like, so you'll often see this like statement used, and like is sort of just what it sounds like here. It doesn't have to be exactly the value you're looking for, but like. So in this case, what the like means is that, hey, any vendor city that starts with SAN, right? And then the percent sign is a wildcard here. Often not to be confused with the asterisk. Often in programming in general, the asterisk is used as a wildcard, but for whatever reason, MySQL and particularly the like operator or the like function, if you're using that, you use this. You use the percent sign as the wildcard. You can also use this. They may not give us an example. You can put the percent sign on either side. And then notice you can use this underscore too. In this case, underscores sort of serves as a wildcard if there's a nested or if you have values on either side or text on either side of a value that you're looking for. All right, now I'm going to get into regular expressions. I think we're going to be using regular expressions later. We'll be using regular expressions later in the semester. Kind of think more than I want to get into right now, but just know if you've used regular expressions before in other programming languages, very similar to how they're used also in MySQL. Yeah, we're not going to get into regular expressions. Yeah, I actually had deleted a bunch of these slides. I don't know how they got it in there, but just go through these and see. Okay, we talked about special characters some. Limit. You've seen me use this. Just a note too for your submissions. Feel free to use the limit statement if you want. I'm asking you when you run queries along with the results. I'm asking you for the submission that you do in Moodle, for instance. If I ask you to run this query as a part of your assignment, you would copy this whole chunk. So you would copy this whole chunk and then paste that into your text file. I honestly don't need all of this, all the results that are returned here. So for instance, with a query like this, feel free to do something like limit 10, and that just shows me again, and I'll see the limit here, and I'll know that I'm only seeing a limited number of results being returned. And often what I'll do is I'll go back and run these queries. If I have any questions about the query that you submitted in Moodle, I'll go run that query myself. So when I go run the query, I can remove the limit portion from the end. Okay, I think that is all. I'm going to pause now. Number one, I see there's a couple of things in chat. I'm looking in there. Okay, I think that's all just the conversation about Discord. So I think we're okay there. Any questions about anything? Okay, good. I hope this
Okay,
was.
sorry to interrupt you.
Hmm?
I'm sort of new to all this, and I was using Windows Terminal, and I just wanted to know if the command line was better to use, because when I was trying to modify a statement and copy and paste that into Windows, I can't do it gave me a warning of doing multiple lines.
Hmm.
And so it logged me out of MySQL because I guess it was just running too much. So is
Okay.
command line easier to use?
So I use the terms terminal and command line interchangeably. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong. Do they have separate icons or separate actually programs? One is called terminal, one is called command line.
Yes.
Okay.
One of them is just Windows Terminal, and then you actually have to type in command line
Okay.
to get that on your computer.
So I think terminal is probably what you want to use.
Okay.
And I know they generally look the same, but I think terminal is probably what you want to use. And I apologize, unfortunately, I don't know the technical difference between the two.
Okay.
But so my recommendation would be to use terminal. And then if you have a specific issue like you're talking about, just send me an email about it, and we'll figure it out.
Okay, I just didn't know because it gave me a warning when I was trying to copy and paste different statements in there that were multiple lines, and it did not like
You
that.
do have to be careful. I was going to say you do have to be careful about that sometimes. And again, I don't know all the rules around it. Generally, it should work. It may depend on the text editor that you're copying and pasting from. Anytime if you've used even Microsoft Word or something where you copy from one document to another, sometimes you'll get formatting issues. Basically the same thing is happening with the terminal window. It's just you might get a carriage return where you don't want one, so it can kind of be fickle.
Okay, perfect. And then I noticed that on the last assignment you told me to put in the query above, and I think you went over that. You just want the statement above what we're actually submitting to count it.
I want the full query. I want the full query along with the results that you get to. That, and also, and I think you may have been one. I may have mentioned this a few other folks. Put the assignment there too, because if you just cut and paste a whole bunch of if you cut and paste a whole bunch of queries and results, I don't always know, okay, is this step one from the book exercise? Is this the My Guitar Shop one? So really what I'm looking for, in fact, I'll do it now. Like I'm going to copy and paste this, and then let me just open up Visual Studio, and let's say I'm going to create a new document. I'm going to paste that in, and this might be chapter 2, exercise 3. All right. And so chapter 2, exercise 3, I see my query, I see the results, that looks good. The next one might be chapter 2, step 5 or 3, let's say. And then I'm going to paste the query in there. The next one might be My Guitar Shop. You can just do MSG if you want. Step 7. Okay. Any
Perfect.
questions
Thank you
about
so
that?
much.
Yeah, and it's just clear for me when I go back and grade, I can quickly look down, and I don't sometimes, sometimes I can recognize, oh yeah, that's the query for this step, and this, chapter 2 for this step, but it just helps me sort of narrow it down. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you all for your patience. I know it's been tough. Again, this is the second year I've taught DBA, and it's been a little better this year than it was last. Although I did change. I'll admit I just slightly changed how the instance of MySQL we used last year was on an Azure server. The login method was slightly different, and so I changed that. And of course, I didn't do as good a job as I would like to have done, making sure the instructions for login and things like that lined up with what that MySQL instance was. So I apologize for that. But again, if you have any questions, just email me. We'll be back hopefully next week, weather permitting. Let me look at my schedule. I was going to say I'm going to potentially be out. Let's see, next week. Going to Savannah next week, but I'm leaving on Tuesday, so we should be okay there. I will be in New York City on February 16th, so I will send an email about that. It's President's Day. That's not a holiday, so we will miss that class. But anyway, I'll be sending an email about class dates. Hopefully, we'll be back on our regular schedule next week. Certainly for the online folks, anybody who wants to come to class, the seated class, again, Mondays at 10 a.m. over in Haynes. Feel free to join us there. Last chance for any questions or comments.
What's the classroom number for the seated class?
I intentionally didn't say it because I know I'll get it. I think it's 110. Although, does anybody want to correct me there? That was there last week.
I'll check the syllabus really quick.
Yeah. See, I think it's 110. It's right across, well, not right across from Pete's, but where Pete's office is on the hall. It's not right across from his office, but the next office to the right, I think.
Looks like Haynes 110.
110.
Thank you.
All righty, everybody stay safe, stay warm, and we will see you soon. Thanks.